Dice, the most prominent, most beloved, and the most recognisable face in the ttrpg community. Yes, other games use things like cards, Jenga towers, and fortune cookies, but dice. People think about dice when they think about ttrpgs, when they think about games on a board or on a table in general. So, here's another question. If we love dice, why is the D20 so beloved? Why is it so prominent? Is it because that D&D is the most prominent game? Yes, that's the answer, yes. But other things we have to talk about is, if the D20 is so beloved, that must mean it's the best, right? Isn't that a slippery slope? What is the best dice? There isn't one. But I think it's very interesting that this dice, despite what it can do, and I literally mean what it can do, not come alive and speak, but the things mathematically that it can do, it has been chosen as the game and the dice to keep throughout many editions of games that we play most prominently. So, why the D20? And is there other ways we can approach games with dice in them that could be more suited to what you like in particular? Have you picked up games with D20 and thought, these problems are with D20s, but they could be fixed with other games? That's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about I want to talk about the alternative dice systems. Not just D20s, but other forms of dice. As a bit of a starting off standard, a D20, aka a roll-over system, uses a dice that you roll over a threshold and you win. But what's another form of dice that I absolutely love? Well, that has to be the likes of the roll-under system, which sounds very similar, but let me explain. So, roll-under systems typically come in the form of the likes of Call of Cthulhu, Mothership, even Dragonbane, games where you have to roll underneath a number on your sheet to win. But they're not as popular. And why might that be? Well, let's first consider the sort of strengths when it comes to these sort of games. Well, they typically are more skill-based, aka they're games that focus on, well, how skilled you are, the numbers on your sheet, rather than things like abilities. Do you have reckless attack? Do you have savage attack? Do you have rage? Probably not if you're talking about a roll under system. You're more likely looking at, can I do this activity? Well, it depends. Roll a dice and roll under your stat. Now, how do you be better at something in these games? Well, have a higher number. You're trying to roll underneath the number, have a bigger number. In Call of Cthulhu, if you have an 80 in the stat, you have an 80% chance to succeed. You have a 20% chance? Not likely. You have a 5% chance, you have to roll really good. For example, 5% is the chance of rolling any number on a D20. And we have different kinds of games. Dragonbane uses a D20, but Call of Cthulhu and Mothership uses a D100. And this sort of D100 usage makes it so the game is quite hackable, and it's quite intricate, and you can have skills that go up minutely and slowly, like the likes of RuneQuest, where your skills can go up by 1 each time they're used, which means that your skills can literally get better as you use them, rather than just arbitrarily when you level up and make a certain choice. And let there be light. Apparently my lights didn't like the idea of roll-under systems either, so why don't people like roll-under systems as much? Well, could it have something to do with the fact that, for example, if you have a D20 and you roll over, that's pretty good, but how can we try and get over easier? Well, we have things like advantage. Roll the dice twice, choose the better result. But what if we don't want to be rolling multiple kinds of dice? What if we want to do the Pathfinder thing of minute and sort of situational bonuses? Well, you might have a scenario bonus that gives you a +2 or a +4. Break does a similar thing. +2. Well, here's the thing. How do you do that in a system where you have to roll under? You might think, well, easy, just give it a minus as opposed to a plus. But how does this sound rolling off the tongue? Great, you do really good in that situation. You get a bonus to your dice. Here's a -2 bonus to your roll. People get really weirdly confused, and especially if they've played other games before, and you hand them a thing like Call of Cthulhu or Dragonbane, what have you, and you say, here you go, here's a D20, or here's a D100, after you've figured out how to make a D100, which I'm baffled people are still confused how that works, but you hand them the dice and say, okay, make a roll. And they roll, they get a 93 and go, great! And then they get confused when you tell them that no, bigger isn't always better. Nice, but these games focus on trying to get a lower number. But giving people a bonus that's actually a minus really doesn't sit with people. And it's quite personal taste most of the time. It's not literally a problem. You literally could give someone, here's a minus 10 to your roll, and boom, I have a 10% chance in a D100 system to get under my roll. Excellent. But still, that just doesn't change the people who have this perception that bigger should be better and a bonus should be a plus, so a negative kind of psychs people out. One way that I've personally tried to approach this, because I think about trying to make my own dice systems constantly, one idea I had was having a D12 system where you have to try and roll underneath your stats, and that might range from 4 to 8. So trying to get an 8 or lower on a D12, that's going to give you a pretty good chance, but a 4 or lower on a D12, that's going to be a pretty low chance. But, okay, why a D12? Well, one thing that I thought was interesting was the idea of trying to roll low in these sort of systems is typically the goal. But what if it was and wasn't? Sounds more complicated, but let me explain. A D12, you roll the dice, and let's say you make an attack roll. You try to attack with your sword. Cool. You have an 8. You're really good at using your sword. Excellent. You roll the dice, and you try to get underneath. Now, you roll a 1. Is that really good? Well, no, because your attack roll is that roll of a D12. So you roll the dice, you get a 1, that's 1 damage. Hang on, so how do you get more damage? Well, you roll something like a 7 or an 8. But that's higher than the 1, and aren't you trying to roll low? Well, you are. You're trying to roll lower than your stat, but just close enough so you deal the most damage. Now, a way to fix this, of course, is if you have a character who has, like, a sword, and they swing with the sword, and then they roll a 1, they somehow just tickle someone with the sword. To get over this, the weapons give you a base number. If you roll a 1, you will hit, but you will deal the base damage of the weapon. Let's say it's like a sword that deals 4 damage. Cool. You can only roll a 4 to an 8 if you have an 8 in your stat. Great. That's a great little spread, and I can roll as low as I want and still get a base of 4. Excellent. But if you get really close to your stat, you actually get more damage. I thought that was pretty interesting, but how does this factor into the whole issue that I had before of bonuses and negatives being pluses and minuses, and how would that work in that system? Because, wait, I'm trying to roll under, so it's not even just give them a minus, because they actually want to get higher on the dice while rolling under, sorry? How does that work? Well, the bonus wouldn't just be a bonus, it would be, here is a twist, here is a modifier, and this modifier, it says 1, or 2, or 3, that kind of thing. And instead of it being just a plain minus, it might be just, here's the roll, make the roll, consult what you've rolled, and then choose, do I want to lower it by 1, or increase it by 1? Simple. You get the roll, and you modify it, plus or negative, it's your choice. That means people don't have to baffle with this idea of higher is better, but lower is better. If they can just have the bonus, be whatever you want. Choose the most advantageous, or, in the other way, more disadvantageous result. I will get back to the D20 in a second, but another type of dice system that I want to talk about is dice pools. And dice pools come in many forms. We have dice pools that aim for a big result, and dice pools that aim for dice facings instead. Now, what do these two things mean? Well, a higher result is similar to the likes of, D20 games or one dice games. Bigger result is a bigger time. Great time. So, rolling multiple dice, trying to get the higher results. We have the likes of Fragged Empire, which does this. I mean, technically, if you want to look at it like that, we have Daggerheart, which does this, which, I guess you could even point to the likes of Powered by the Apocalypse games, because they use multiple dice, but you just have to squint your eyes pretty hard to get to that conclusion. But dice pool games like Fragged Empire, as I mentioned, these focus on high results and using the dice also with the dice facings. And what do I mean by dice facings? Well, dice facings, we have to roll the dice and consider what we have rolled. Fragged Empire aims for high results, but if you roll a 6, or any number of 6s, you can spend them to empower the roll. You can deal more damage or have a better success, that kind of thing. So it uses high results and dice facings. Now for dice facings, there's a lot of games like that. We have the likes of, let's say, the Alien RPG, which uses a lot of d6s that you roll, and if you roll a 6 on one of them, that's a success. Unless it's a harder version that you need to get, then you might get a harder success if you roll multiple d6s to try and beat a harder sort of task, which is super fun and interesting. It uses your stats as a number of 6s that you roll rather than just bonuses on a d20. Very fun. Now, what other games do we have? We have the likes of Tiny Dungeon, which is a very simple dice pool mechanic that uses dice facings technically. 2d6, if you get a 5 or 6 on either one, then you succeed. 3d6, if you have advantage. 5 or 6 on either one, it's a success. There we go. I've increased my chance, but I'm bad at something. That's 1d6. Ooh, okay. Disadvantage is not fun. If I have to roll 1d6 and get a 5 or a 6, it's only a 33% chance of getting that, so pretty unlikely. So dice pool mechanics with facings and high results can be quite interesting. But there are other things to consider. For example, I've mentioned the likes of the Alien RPG, even Tiny Dungeon and Fragged Empire, which use, if you get a 6 or a 5 or a 6, then you succeed and get a really good success in some instances. But there are other games that don't just go for the highest result is the best result. For example, the game Triangle Agency, sorry, I almost said Academy there, Triangle Agency, it uses a bunch of d4s, which is my least favourite dice, which is the only reason I won't play them. So, unless I get an alternate version of a d4, I won't be playing that game. Instead, I'll just say to you, it's a fantastic game. But one thing that's really interesting, and it's full of flavour, that game, but one thing that's interesting is that it's a dice pool system. But it doesn't say, if you roll a 4, then it's a success. Instead, you have to roll a 3. Why a 3? Because triangles have 3 sides. Because other things to do with the number 3. It's just an arbitrary choice for it to be a 3, and I love it. I think it's really funny that it's just roll a d4 and get a 3 rather than just like a d6 and change it into a d3 roll. Very fun. But what other things we have to consider? Well, we have d6s, we have d12s, we have all these different dice with numbers on them. What if they didn't have numbers on and instead had dice facings in the literal degree? Well, we have games like Shiver. Some degrees, the officially licensed Fallout RPG from Modiphius Dice have that, and also the Star Wars RPGs typically have their own dice that you have to buy to sort of pair with the game. Some games have like an app that helps you along, like the Shiver RPG has that, but games like the Star Wars RPG, you need to buy those dice, and that sounds like I'm saying that it's a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing. If I was going to make a dice pool system, I'd just make it on numbers, but it's fine. The sort of dice facings that they have, however, are very interesting because you roll them together, you have to combine. How much threat did I get? How much negative did I get? How much positive did I get? And I put this all together and I consult the bones to consider, did I succeed? Did I fail? Did I get a good result? Did I get a bad result on top of succeeding and failing? Was there triumph? Was there fumbles? All this stuff to consider. It's quite interesting to just consult the dice. And again, similar thing happens with Shiver, and a similar thing happens with the sort of dice that you roll in Modiphius' games, the Fallout RPG, where you roll the d6s to see if you shoot and deal 1 damage, 2 damage, or get like crits and that kind of thing. So, there's all sorts of things with normal dice, rolling a high result, rolling dice facings, and having completely bespoke dice. And of course, Triangle Academy going, roll a 3. Because funny. And just as I promised, we're here at the D20, or at least, well, I don't want to call it a D20 system, but a single dice system, aka roll over a certain result, add a bonus, you've won. That sort of thing. We roll a 15, I have a +5 bonus, that's an unnatural 20. I rolled a 20, that's a natural 20. But even as I say that, a single dice system can apply to the likes of, technically, Call of Cthulhu and Dragonbane. Dragonbane uses a d20. You have to roll underneath their results on the skills that you have in order to meet and beat and roll underneath the skill. But when we typically think of these sort of systems with a d20, a single dice system, we think of rolling as high a result as we can. In Pathfinder, we're trying to get to numbers like 40. In D&D 5e, it's like 30. And other games use different results that are high equals better. We have plus bonuses and just keep going to the stratosphere. Higher result is better. That's fun. So, bigger is better, deviates from the single D100 roll under system. It makes sense to have more bonuses equals better, bigger is better, fun. Oh yes, I rolled a natural 20, isn't that super cool on my dice? So, let's consider the possibilities with the D20, because I asked, why is it so prevalent? Well, I think the pros that come with a D20 and single dice systems in general is that it's very simple. I pick up this dice, I roll the dice, I get a result, and I aim for a big result, and I get a big success in a big time. Meanwhile, I try to roll underneath on a percentile system with my different things, and I have to try to roll under half this result. Meanwhile, I just rolled a 17, it beats a 15, I succeed. There's simplicity to that. There's simplicity to one dice. I'm not picking up a dice pool and throwing them all on the table and consulting the bones. I have one dice. I roll it. Oh, I got a 9. Excellent. What does that mean? It depends on the system, but it's simple. Another thing I have to consider when it comes to this is a D20. Another reason it might be so prevalent is because, consider this. In RuneQuest, every time you use one of your skills, you might increase it by 1. What's the difference between 43% and 42%? Well, it's 1%, but in your mind, how can you represent that in your character? Can you? The human brain doesn't work well with minute percentages. It likes to look at things like categorical or bigger chunks of percentages like D20s. 5%, not percent integers. We have 5%, 10%, 15. If you try to beat a certain DC, you're looking to see, okay, DC 15, I have a +5, I need to roll a 10, which means I have a 55% chance of success. Excellent. That's pretty easy to work out, because I'm working out in 5% intervals. Great. Other games, percentage-wise, less easy to grasp. And other size of dice, also quite hard to grasp. A D10, 10%, that's easy, yeah. D12? I'm still on the fence whether it's 16 or 13, I can't remember. But the question that almost inspired this whole video in general is the question of, what are the cons to this dice? What are the cons to single dice systems? Well, I will be answering or sort of giving a suggestion to fix this. It's not really fixable or it's not really needing a fixing, but a solution to certain cons with a D20 system is the fact that a D20 has results ranging from a 1 and a 20. And there's 20 results on a D20. A D100? That's 100 results on that dice. Okay, so if I want to be rolling against my stat in a roll under game, oh, well, I have an 80% chance to succeed. Great. I have a number of percent chance to get a 15 by adding a +5 on my D20 roll, blah, 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 blah. But this dice here, there's a little bit of an issue here, in that it's random. Yes, I'm aware that it'll make some people angry, but yes, all dice are random. All dice, you roll them, and they are random. But despite that, percentage chance is a consideration when it comes to playing the game, GMing a game, and making a game. When it comes to the dice mechanic, you have to think about the percentage chance that you have to succeed and fail a roll. And on a D20, a single dice of any kind, each result is the same. It's completely random, or it should be. You know, there's some people who think that some dice are weighted, or because of the different facings or the indentations of the numbers are technically weighted on other sides, but never mind that. It should have a completely flat 5% chance of any result, and that's random. And randomness isn't really how the world works. Let me explain. In a roll under system, you have an 80% chance to succeed, but it's a very swingy dice. You could have an 80% chance to succeed and still roll 90, 90, 90, and just never succeed that great result that you have. Meanwhile, if you have a game that has multiple dice in a dice pool, if you're trying to roll, let's say, a medium of like 7 on 2d6, well, that's very likely because a 2d6 system has a bell curve. And the con of complete randomness is with this system is that it doesn't replicate skill. The barbarian with a -2 in intelligence might sit there with his fingers on his chin thinking about a subject. Meanwhile, the wizard thinks about the exact same subject. They both roll a d20, and the wizard gets a 1, and the barbarian gets a 20. And all of a sudden, the expert on arcane law has no idea about this magical subject. Meanwhile, the barbarian's like, oh, I know about this subject. I'm an expert. Which, to some people, is clap hands. Isn't that funny? Yay! That's so fun. But it also doesn't really make sense for the character. If I have a +7, if I have a +7, +9, +11 in this roll, but I got a 1, which means I failed. Yes, all dice are random, but these ones are more random. These ones don't replicate how likely you are to succeed. Yes, you can have a big result, a big bonus, which can increase your chances, but that could also mean that you get like a +11. Oh, great, I just rolled a 31, as opposed to a 12 from getting a 20 and a 1. It's incredibly swingy, and to some people, that is some people's bag. They love the idea of just randomness. However, there's a lot of complaints when it comes to randomness. There's a lot of, I rolled low, yay, I rolled high. And not really any control over that. And if you want to go for an approach to how skilled your character is, I think it goes more than just, a dice. And it's completely random each day. I rolled a 1, and I suck now at this thing that I'm supposed to be good at. What's the deal with that? Is there a way to fix it? Yes, there is a way to fix it. It's called a bell curve. And this is a subject that I've mentioned in the past about, well, depending on who says it, it can typically feel quite, yes, chin-strokingly, yes, bell curves are so fun. What is a bell curve? Well, a bell curve is when there's multiple dice. Typically for a bunch of games, 2, or as I said before, Fragged Empire, there's 3. And when you roll multiple dice, it's not just 5%. It's not just 1% each time. It's an average. Because if 2 dice, at least 2, if 2 dice are rolling as well, like at the same time, there's combinations at play. 2d6, for example, if you're trying to roll a 12 on 2d6, that is one combination. That is one combination on a full range. Meanwhile, a 7, there's 36 combinations in order to get a 7. So that means getting a 7 is much more likely. This is taken advantage of, in games like the Power by the Apocalypse system, where getting a 7 is actually the most likely result on 2d6, and is also where the most interesting result hides. If you get around a 7 in a Power by the Apocalypse game, the mixed success is the most interesting result. It's not just, oh, you succeeded, carry on. Or you fail, too bad. The mixed success comes with the bell curve of 2d6, which means that game focuses on action and narrative, and the dice help that happen. Your characters will likely get an average of 7 plus or minus their bonuses. Interesting. So now, instead of just, I rolled a dice and I got a massive swing, I typically get this area of results. Typically around an 8, 9, or 7. And my bonus, +3, which means I typically get a 10. Or if I have a minus, I might typically get a 6, 7, 5, or 4. So that range can replicate skill a lot more than other games, because I'm more likely to be average. And isn't that the case with everyone? But I'm more likely to be average than I am to be spectacular. And I'm more average to be average. I'm more likely to be average than I am likely to just be complete agents of randomness in every single topic and task that I attempt. So, the pros of dice pools, the pros of D100s, the pros of bell curves, are all things that the D20 and the single dice system lacks. You can't have a single D20 have an average, because there is no averages when you're working with perfect randomness on the dice. And you also can't have things where there's different kinds of facings and successes unless you just homebrew some weird rules into it. And this is not me saying that a D20 system is bad. In fact, this is me saying a D20 system is incredibly simple. 1 dice, I roll it, I succeed, I fail, and the whole whims of fate, randomness, chance, is decided by this, and I don't really have control over that. And because of that, it's kind of freeing, isn't it? Because my character is just swinging and missing left, right, and centre, and also doing really good results and average results because of the folders flat spread of a d20. That means that I get to take the weight off my soldiers. Soldiers? My shoulders! I can't speak today. The weight comes off my shoulders because I'm not rolling bad. The dice is just rolling bad. That's what this dice does. It just does what it wants. And the story, how well my character does, how bad my character does, is up to this, and not up to me. It's not up to my skill. It's not up to anything I'm doing. It's to do with this. And when we're just trying to chill, have a good time, we can all laugh at the natural 1 that Greg rolled and celebrate when, Jenny gets a natural 20. So, with all that in mind, what dice system do you really enjoy and what dice system do you despise? Because there are some that I don't despise, let me get that straight, but there are some that I prefer rather than other ones. But I really do like bell curve systems quite a bit. I like dice pool systems for certain sort of stuff. I like rolling under systems like, Call of Cthulhu. It makes things super simple. I got this much, I roll under, perfect. I can represent my likelihood to succeed by having percentages on my sheet. Super simple, even if the character creation process is not simple. But yes, the elegance of a d20, the mathematical advantage of 5% is better to grasp in your head rather than just a full pool of d100, 1% integers. And yeah, what's there not to love about this little rock? Well, this one's foam, but yours are probably your math rocks. But with that being said, I'm going to leave off because I think I'm having a strunk. So I'm gonna call a bondulance. Let me know what you think in the comments about dice systems, your favourite, your least favourite in the comments. And with that, I love you all, and I'll see you next time.